Making benches out of pallet wood is how I got into woodworking. Since then, I've made and sold dozens of benches, all sorts of benches. Between seasonal items and other things I try on the marketplace, benches are my biggest selling items. Most of my benches are made from pallet wood. I use everything from the top planks to make glue-ups for the tops to the 2x4s and 2x3s from the runners that I use for legs or other frame parts. I live in the industrial sector of my city, so dumps of pallets by the road next to businesses is a daily thing. I can just drive a minute or two and find enough pallets to just come back with the good ones that will give me lots of usable material. There's many ways I use pallet wood for benches. In this case, I use the runners to make 2x2s for the frame and the pallet planks to make a herringbone design bench top. This bench is quick to make and easy to sell. It also doesn't require much drying time because it has no glue ups. It's a quick project to make from start to finish in one session. One of my most popular benches was this red bench that I made from pallet runners. I ripped the 2x4s down to 2x3s and planed both flat surfaces and end up with a very nice, dry, straight lumber to make this. The most important part of this bench design is the curve at the top of the legs. I simply use a bottle of paint and sander to get this effect. As well as looking good, it makes the bench safer to use, removing that sharp edge at the top. Assembly is very straightforward. All the screws are only visible from under. It's a quick project that you can make in less than an hour once you're used to the process and parts. In the summer I sold many of those, in all the bright Rust-Oleum colors, from orange, red, yellow, blue and more. I offer red as a base and offer other colors for a $15 premium. This pays for half of the paint I have to buy, while I only use about 5% of the can, leaving me the rest to make some money on other projects. This is another bench that I sell a lot in the summer. It can be made in kid size like this with a single 2x6 and can be scaled to adult size with more materials, of course. I've made this bench to be easy to batch out, with most parts being shared length, and I use my miter saw to make quick work of that. Assembly, same as the red bench, is simple, fast and without glue ups. By making multiples of the parts, you can easily make many of those in a day. I used a can here, but I've since converted to only using their 1-liter cans, which last a lot longer and are easier to use indoors in my new shop. This type of bench is the main ones I make and sell. They're made from a glue-up of pallet wood strips, and the legs are made from 2x4 runners, ripped and planed to be flat and clean. For a day or two, all I did was break down pallets. I was about to move to my new house and I needed to get rid of those pallets. What better way to transfer them into money with benches? As usual, I check for and remove all nails before using any of my tools. Doing everything in batches like that felt like a lot of work at that time, but making 10 benches was fun and making over $1,000 from it sure helped. On the table saw, I rip off an edge and then rip all into 1.5-inch slices, which will be the thickness of the bench minus the planing to be done after the. When I say many, I mean many. This whole table was filled with strips. I ended up making more than 10 benches, and ended up with 5 more bench tops. Those are the tops that ended up being my current workbench. Randomly, I select enough strips to give me a 1-foot wide glue up, narrow enough to fit in my planer once dry. When you do glue ups like this, make sure you use enough glue to have it thick all over the surface. It might seem excessive, but any lack of glue will make some problems. To save on clamps, I clamp more than one bench at a time. I use green painter's tape to visually separate the benches, but also avoid accidental glue-ups from the glue seeping in from under. The next day, to leave them plenty of time to dry, plane down the bench top so that both top and bottom are flat and feel smooth to the touch. I use the miter saw to trim off both ends of the bench, before rounding out the edges with a chamfer or run-over bit, depending on the style wanted. For the legs, I rip down both sides of the pallet wood 2x4s. Then I plane down both surfaces to get bare wood on all sides. Make sure when using pocket holes for legs that they're only visible from the bottom, or like this piece towards the top but hidden by the bench top. I paint and stain it depending on what sells well or custom orders, but it's usually a dark brown top with black legs. This bench is my most popular bench and the one I make the most. This bench, I sold many over the summer, and for a huge profit. It's a heavy bench, so I had people wanting them for outdoors, in various finishes to match their stuff. I sold them for $120, and it took me about 2 hours to make one. Here's how. The thick parts are just 2x3s that I stick together. To make it look seamless, once they're dried, I run them in the planer. To be able to paint before assembly, I use tape wherever the glue joints will be, then I remove the tape. This makes for quick work of this bench without having to paint into deep areas with a bad result. Once the leg parts are dry, I run them in the planer to hide the gap or line between the bolts. This bench has no visible screws. I pre-drilled the holes to put dowels behind the screws that I later cut flush and sand. I add plenty of glue and do the same for the base. It will be supported by a 45-degree brace later, so just screws for now is okay. The big 45-degree brace adds a nice rustic charm to this bench that my buyers love. It also makes it very solid and heavier, which they also love for this type of bench. That's about all the types of benches I made in 2024. I hope to make different and more advanced benches over the next year. Thanks for watching and see you next time.